Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Empowered Mama Summit. Today, I have Elizabeth Caraballo, who is a vibrational guide, joining us today. Hi, Elizabeth. Thanks for joining us. Will you share with the people watching, tell us a little bit about what you do?
Thank you so much, Carmen, for inviting me. I'm so excited about this. I've been geeking out all morning. I got my lipstick on, girl, all for you.
Yeah.
So I call myself a vibrational guide. I didn't fill out a form, but what I do is I really help other people. Generally, I have like three things criteria: that you're here to contribute something amazing, that you're eager and willing to try something new, and there's got to be some kind of element of rebellion. Like, you don't have to have tattoos on your face, but just a little bit of subversive attitude to be like, I want to do it my way, because I think that's really powerful for me. I've always been a little rebellious. So what I mainly do is I work with, let's say, some kind of discrepancy in someone or a group of people, and we talk about a little bit about what that means and how we can shift our perception emotionally, physically, physiologically, like really shift all parts of it to kind of fit an easier flow. So the reason why we do that is so that we can enjoy what we're doing. And the reason why we do that is so that we can keep it up, right? Because it's really hard to keep up what you hate. So this is all on this premise that we are literally millions of layers. We are super, super, super expansive and growth oriented. And so with these kind of premises that I really focus on, which is feeling good, walking your talk, making priority of those two things, like in all parts of your life, physically, emotionally, spiritually, within your relationships, within your work life. And by doing this, because there's this ongoing process of growth, then you begin to have a life that you created deliberately. You know, I'm really into this idea that I create my reality. And the how is what I really get into. So how are we going to create it? How are we going to love it? So that's why I get into feeling good and kind of the nuances of our emotional language and, you know, little tricks to kind of create new ideas, new pathways. I kind of melt a whole bunch of different philosophies into one big like soup of, I just want to feel better, damn it. And that's what we get to. And then once you feel better, it's like so much else happens. Just like for you, the minute you start feeling a little bit better, there's just a lot more flexibility. You're more nimble.
Yeah. And I love that. So I actually consult with Elizabeth quite often. She's an amazing vibrational guide and really helps me to get the clarity that I need around business and just kind of my personal life. But just to kind of, you know, because I know a little bit about your story, kind of where you were to where you are now, why don't you share with us a little bit about kind of this idea of, you know, like intentional living or, you know, this deliberate, creating a life deliberately, right? And essentially, and I'm smiling because I know your background and just kind of, you know, the rebellion part of it. But tell me a little bit about your journey, how you got here, and then kind of what was your turning point, you know, in terms of this intentional living? Did you always live that way? You know, tell us a little bit about that.
So let's see. I am Puerto Rican. I was born into a military family, so I moved around from the get-go. And my nature is to be really shy and really reserved. So I spent the first like 10, 12 years of my life living that way. Very creative, you know, when I was comfortable. And I've always been silly and goofy. But to the outward world, I was very reserved, very shy. But I would still do things my own way. I just could never help it. I grew up in a very religious, very conservative family. My dad went to seminary while I was in school, and we lived on a Christian campus for like 6 years. So it was very much on a conservative Christian basis. And I just I couldn't settle into it. I could play the part, and I was intelligent to understand the theology behind it, but I just was like, it cannot be. There's just one way. So my mom actually forced me into like acting and all this stuff. She said I couldn't get my car if I didn't get some friends in a hobby. Painting in the walls of my room did not qualify at this point. She was like so worried I'd end up alone with 20,000 cats. And that started my ability to like thicken my skin and deal with people. And part of it was like I didn't want rejection. And part of it was like I was just so freaking impressionable and sensitive towards moods and ideas, impressions, histories. I was really quick to assess situations. And I always took it really personally. Like I didn't have this distance between, oh, that's their shit. Like I always tended to think, what did I do? How did I? So I kind of built up my skin in my late teens and my early 20s. I went to college and I dropped out like, oh God, I want to say 3 or 4 times. I still paid like $15,000 for it, but you know, it felt like 15 million. But one thing that was consistent was I've always been an explorer of anything I could. And spirituality, metaphysics, new age, like that whole soup, even down to like folklore from different cultures and Buddhism, all of it was very fascinating to me because I always thought there was like this underlying current to everything that had to agree, right? And I just wanted to figure out what was that, because I could probably pledge my allegiance to that, but everything else came with all these rules and variations that I just couldn't get down with. I'm not judgy. I'm not an exclusive type of person. I believe everybody's entitled, everybody's great, everybody's just trying to feel better, even the worst of the worst. And so because I am so broad and I was looking for what was that undercurrent, I dipped my toe in so many waters. And like, you know, I was like, hey, sure, we'll go to Thailand for tomorrow for 6 months. Why not? You know, I show up with no visa and fake like I'm a student and I live illegally for 3 months. Like I never really did it right, but I did a lot and I went deep. I would go real far, real fast, and I would really just submit myself to something new. But for me, I didn't heal a lot of the pains and stuff in my childhood, and they manifested. Even if I was like out there and sociable and adventurous, I still harbored lots of addictions, shitty relationships, cyclic living, like feast, famine, feast, famine. So my mother actually, oddly enough, introduced me to a lot of this thinking. When I was 16, she gave me a book about Jose Silva, who works a lot with like the mind, how we can control realities or things, timing. I've never used an alarm clock since then for getting up. I can get up whenever I want. It was a little trick he taught me in the book, and I just never changed that. And then my mom introduced me to Seth, which was kind of like a really thick prequel to like Abraham Hicks, which my mom introduced me to when I was 18. And so I'm 40 now. So it's been about 22 years that I've been following that philosophy of thought. And it's had a lot of transformations and you know, different analogies. But because it's so general, I've been able to stick with that longest, right? They didn't ask for ties. There weren't any rules. I could drop in and come out. And so it kind of stayed a mainstay. But the logic of it is what appealed to me. However, for my life, I wanted both lives. So I lived a double life for a long time. It wasn't until my daughter was about 5 years old that it just kind of, she was really smart, and she would just say things that would put me right in a pickle, and I'd be like, damn it. I never wanted to lie to her, but I didn't necessarily want to give up what I liked, you know, whether it was like men or drinking or smoking or going out every once in a while or whatever it would be. Those things felt good, and they were big enough and they felt enough that I could forget other things. So that relationship with her really forced me to walk my talk in a whole new way. And again, it was because I was being a bit rebellious. I wasn't going to be the type of mom to lie and be like, no, I never smoked pot. You know, I was like, you know what, screw it. Fuck it, man. I'm going to tell her what it is. Yeah. I'm going to tell her. I mean, by the time my kid was 8, she'd been to Thailand and been to ladyboy shows, and she knows way too much. I don't know. Maybe I should record this with you. Oh, God, I'm going to get in trouble. But so that's always been important to me, to kind of do it my own way and like really buck the system. I don't believe in like conforming to everyone has to do it the same way and the same thing. And I think that's why I've been able to jump into this world in the last 6 months of just sharing this and being this, because I had to practice it so hard to get through PTSD and massive depression, suicidal ideologies, addictions, and like those kind of, you know, it's so much more common, and it's so much more common than we acknowledge, and it's so much more striking. It impacts us so much deeper than we're willing to let on, you know. So like we're always at this deficit between not having the acknowledgement and not having enough support, and then we have no choice but to feel isolated and alone. So I really work on just breaking all that shit down all the time. Like I'm super transparent. I love to share that part about my life just because I'm like, I get it. I totally freaking get it. And I also can get it when I'm working with you, trying to like get you to walk your talk. But yeah, that shit took me like 7-8 years. So I'm not expecting anyone to like turn into anything right away because I've got the magic touch. But I also know what it takes to stay consistent. And I also understand the value of accountability. So like kind of all plays in from my story because nobody really knew all of me. And then I had a kid, and I have no other parent. Her father died while I was pregnant. So it's just me all the time. I've had my parents in and out, but they're not the mom, right? So she's just witnessing me all the time and all of me. And so it really forced me to be like, okay, these two girls have got to figure out what's going on. Because it's a split energy way of living, even if she wasn't around. It wasn't me at my fullest.
Yeah. I think that that's so important, you know, for the moms that are tuning in and watching this, that it's a journey, right? It's not something that you figure out like right away. And when you're so used to living life a certain way, whether it's, you know, like for me, I was, you know, like, you know, to use your words, like I was always the good student. Like I was the first in my family to go to college. I then went to law school. I did everything that I was supposed to do, right? Fell into a career that, you know, anybody would, you know, most people are like, oh, I want to be a lawyer or doctor. Like, well, I ended up being a lawyer and, you know, but I hit 30 and I was like, I have all these external things that are like, yay for you. But I was like, there's more to life than this. Like this cannot be it. And I'm not going to live the rest of my life that way. But in tuning into kind of, and figuring out who you are, right? Because you kind of knew who you were through your journey and through this, you know, at a young age, like you know who you are, but being able to kind of stay in tune with that person, right? Who you were at a young age and those personality traits, and knowing that it's okay, but also knowing that you're going to change and you'll have these ups and downs as you go through this journey in terms of you know, like living a purpose-filled life. And around the purpose-filled life, I want to ask you, why would you say that it's important to live kind of like this with intention and essentially with purpose every day? And also how that intentional living is then empowering?
Well, it certainly isn't necessary to live with intention. You know, we all know somebody who literally just lives the life that we're supposed to. They wake up, they eat, they work out, they go to work, they come back, they wake up, they eat, they go to work, they get married, they have kids, they do their taxes. You don't have to. You can even be a bum and just choose a life that has no focus. You get up, and if you eat that day, you eat that day. Sleep under a rock. Like, you can do it. You can survive, and you can live in many different ways. I think the importance of intention has to do with expressing the genius you came here to do. Like, you chose this. I totally believe that. I'm not a haphazard chick at all. I don't believe in like someone asserting their reality on you. I don't believe that you just happen to pop up, that you just happen to be the 1 in 1 trillion sperm that made it to the egg. Like, I don't believe that. I believe we come in with massive intention and focus. And if we don't have it, we're not here yet. So you're here. So you focused yourself here. You got yourself here. There was a reason why you wanted to play here. There was an idea, an effort, a sentiment, something you wanted to expand on that you couldn't do as a cloud or a form or a thought or a ghost, whatever the hell you believe, right? So the idea of living intention has a lot more to do with, for me, being the full you. So like, there's a little edgy part of me that's like, you came to do some shit, go fucking do it, right? So that's like one point of intention where you're like, okay, point your ship. You said you wanted to go to LA. Go to LA. What are you doing in Yuma? Get the hell over there, right? It's one of my favorite analogies. But then there's this other part of intention that says, wouldn't it feel so good to realize and to palpably understand and feel into and get to experience this idea that you can make some shit happen? Like, one of the things that's so frustrating when you're in someone else's life is that you cannot lead a horse to water and force it to drink. You can lead the horse to water, but the choice to drink is up to that horse, right? So in our friendships, we can love, we can uplift, we can talk our heads off, we can take them to 100 seminars, we can send them thousands of books, but it doesn't matter, right? We can't implement happiness or change or any of that stuff. We just have to watch. And it's so powerful to me because you can do that in one place, in your own life. And intention is the thought, the concept that just by knowing how I want to feel, I can really guide my ship in a specific way and create certain things to go down, to be experienced. And I think that because my intention, what I believe, because my fulfillment, what fulfills me, what I believe we are is joy. To me, I think whether I'm going to be, let's say I want to be a famous singer. If I be a famous singer through toil and trouble, or I be a famous singer through mistakes and follies and just following my blissful path, either which way it's going to happen. But this is like, it gets a little bit more. This is a little more advanced of a dish. We're going from Cheerios to maybe some like homemade, still cut, like granola that this lady picked off of a mountain, and she's friends with a bear. And you're like, oh, I paid $50 for this, right? There's a story that's delicious. There's layers versus like, I got some Cheerios going on. Because it's going to happen either which way. You're going to have a life. If you're here, if you're watching this, if you're breathing, you're going to have a life, and you're going to be fine. You're going to breathe the whole time. And then when you're dying, you're going to stop breathing. But there's some more deliciousness that's available to you. And I think that's the undercurrent for so many individuals right now that's new. It's like, there is something else to this. I know it. And you're just stuck there. You're like, it's like when you're trying to make, like a sauce, and you're like, what is freaking missing? You take it to so-and-so, you're like, taste this. You're like, salt. You put salt. You're like, no. You take it to so-and-so, like basil. You're like, oh, basil. I forgot the basil. You taste it. You're like, what is missing? Right? And you just won't stop until it hits that full body yes. And the intention is a lot about finding that full body yes and saying, that's what I want. I want that full body yes. And so therefore, it's just going to shape the articulation of my intention. But I need an intention to get that full body yes. Yeah.
And I love that you kind of, the analogies that you gave around like cooking, and it's just kind of like knowing like, the full body yes. And the idea too that you touched on about us making the decision, one, to be here, right? And two, the decision to decide what kind of life we're going to live, whether it's the yummy, delicious $50, for like 16 ounces of granola versus, $4 for the big box of Cheerios. Like, and us having that power to determine how we're going to live our lives and what we do on a daily basis, and making those decisions with the intention rather than being a person living under a rock.
Right.
And on that note of, this personal power and, because I think as moms, we so often put our own dreams on the back burners, or we kind of lose ourselves, right? And working with some of my clients, what they tell me is like, I used to be fun. I used to be exciting. And one thing that I vowed to be, and I think that you kind of, are living this, is that you're not going to be the like Pinterest mom or that average mom where you do, X, Y, and Z. You have to like puree the foods for them, or you have to, all of these things that we're supposed to do as moms. Like I want my daughter to know everything, about me, right? Did you smoke pot? Did you, I don't know, how old were you when you first had sex? Like,
right.
All these things, like, and birth control, and, just kind of keeping it real and honest, because I think, and it may be generational, but we come from families that, it was like, these are prim and proper ways that you're supposed to do things. And it's like, No.
Yeah, it's secrecy.
Mm-hmm.
Secrecy was king. Why? Because it controls the free radicals. Why? Because those free radicals endanger what our reward is. What's our reward? It's approval. It's love. So it really plays into how we do everything. Why do we decide to be the perfect mom? Like for me, I tried, but I had so much freaking momentum in my rebellion, in my crazy life, that it was like, I don't know, I was like a bodybuilder trying to put on a onesie. It just wasn't going to happen. So we have to break down, why do I continue to force myself into this mold? Why do I keep doing this? Why does it, like, to me, in there, that's the work. That's where you get into the essence, the vibration, the frequency of it. And it's because we receive a reward. It's because somehow in that, we're receiving something that feels really fucking good. And the truth to understand about that is, no one does anything for any other reason. The only reason why we do anything is because somehow we figured that in some way, that action, that sentiment, that discussion will help us feel a little bit better. The terms on what feels better varies, like the freaking colors of the light. There's so many things in that spectrum on what better feels like to different people. But the sentiment at the base of it all is, I just want to fucking feel better.
Yeah.
Whether it's I'm hungry or sad or I don't have enough clothes, all those things we do to feel that is so that we feel better than what we feel now,
And I think that that's the point that you touched on in terms of almost like the means to the end to feel better, right? Is like what feels good or what I need to do so I feel good is different from what you need to do versus, somebody who's watching this. Like it can be, it's a range of things, and nobody's life or, kind of journey is going to look the same, and knowing that that's okay. But in kind of connecting to and knowing, right, what feels good to you and what will make you feel good is empowering, right? So let me ask you, in terms of, this like living with intention and this purpose-filled life, how would you say, or why would you say that, let me rephrase this. How is living with intention and the purpose-filled life, how is that related to kind of this idea of empowerment and being, an empowered mom? By knowing yourself, how would that be empowering? And then why is it important in creating a legacy?
Well, I think what this is all kind of dancing around is boundaries. So when I have an intention, I have a purpose, those things feel right to me, I do them. Why is it that I feel empowered? Well, there's a variable within feeling empowered, first of all, but when we know our own edges or our own barriers or our own ends, our own limits to our expansion, or better yet, when we know how to stroke the vein of really what gets us going, lights us up, whatever that is, right? When we know that, it's so empowering, because then it becomes something that is omnipresent. So when I know not only what I don't like, but I know what I do like, when I know how to achieve or feel or receive or participate in what feels good to me, then I feel empowered, not simply because I know that, but because I can flex it, and I've practiced flexing it in situations that don't meet my standard. And so I've seen myself, or I've experienced myself, or I've felt what it feels like to literally extract what I want and manipulate my situation for my own betterment on my own. And that makes you feel powerful, because then your happiness is no longer subject to things that are out of your control. Like what I talked about, how we can love our friends, but we can't get them to have that shift. We can't get them to be happy, no matter what our desire is for them, right? But when I know what gets me to a better place, then I have so much more balls. Like my ovaries just done grown because I'm like, you know what? This might suck, but like, let's say a date. I'm going to go on this date. Da, da, da. If I didn't feel like I have a way to bounce back from a potentially shitty date, I probably should not be going on a date, right? Just by the law of statistics. Yeah. So for me, I'm more empowered to meet new people. Like even this is my first time talking to people like somebody, you know, being all talking to somebody and fancy. I do this in a feeling of empowerment because I also know if this goes haywire, if I burp or like, you're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I don't know. And I can't, you know, it falls apart. Yeah. I know that even at the end of that, I have recourse. Mm-hmm. I have my physical tricks. I have my mental tricks. I have my emotional tricks. I have some strategy tricks. Like I might be like, hey, how about I give you something for free to never air that again, right? I can come up with all kinds of ways to make it feel better. When you feel like you don't have a way, when you feel like, I don't know how I'm going to bounce back from this, I don't know if I can handle that pressure, I don't know when you're in that place and you don't even know that, see, because that's when you don't know yourself, you don't know your purpose, you don't know what feels good, then you don't have empowerment. Then empowerment isn't possible because you feel powerless. You feel as though you're just really a leaf in the wind and you're just doing your best to brace for when you hit something. Yeah. That reactionary life, right? So you can turn that around. You neutralize that momentum by then saying, well, I'm going to put an intention. Yeah. Even if you don't have like, I'm going to be a business badass or I'm going to be a guru or something, you could just say, I'm going to have, be, listen, obey, find, seek, whatever. The intention to just feel a little bit better then. Yeah. Right? And that general direction just guides your ship immediately. Yeah. It just helps so much.
And how would you say, so, you know, clearly, you know, being intentional and, you know, kind of tuning into what you need, what your body needs, what you mentally need, spiritually, etc. How does that help in creating a legacy and really what does legacy mean to you? Because, you know, during the summit, we're talking about reclaiming personal power, living a purpose-filled life. And clearly, you know, based on what we're talking about right now is living a purpose-filled life and is, you know, helps you to reclaim your power, right? The claiming your power and purpose are very tied in together. But as a combination and that empowerment factor, how does that help in creating legacy?
Well, you know, when I think of the word legacy, I think of like an echo in a canyon, right? So for me, if I'm like, ba-da-ba-bum, and it go bum, 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 right? And then it's done. But what we're talking about with intention and purpose, this really begs the idea of your stamina, your consistency, your commitment to that. How many times are you willing to get back up when you fall flat on your face? How many times are you willing, right? So then that says my legacy, every time I get up and I'm like, I've got this, it's like I'm going, ba-ba-da-bum. If I do ba-ba-da-bum, ba-da-bum, ba-da-bum, that's all you're going to hear in the canyon, right? Everybody fucking knows that I'm in the water hole because I've been singing inside the canyon. That to me is the relationship of the legacy. So for me, every time I get up and I recommit myself or I get re-excited or I just fucking get up, right? I just get up and I just keep at it, even if it's quietly working on my website in the background or if it's telling everybody about it or if it's coming up with a new idea. Every time I get back up, I'm adding to the momentum and to the frequency of what it is I choose to stand for. And that, to me, is my legacy. So my legacy is when I'm not in a room and someone refers to me, what is the general consensus of frequency, emotion, reaction? What do I stir up? Do I stir up like, oh God, Liz? Or do I stir up like, that girl crazy? Or do I stir up, I love Liz? Or do I like, what does she do? What do I stir up? Because that's my legacy. Yeah. I can try to say what my legacy is, but for me, the proof is really in the pudding. So when I enter a room, what's my stench? What's my funk? What's my stink? And how are people reacting? In that, you know, collaboration between those two infrastructures, those two grids, those two organisms, that little Venn diagram right there, that's my legacy because it can never be simple. If I was a singular person in a vacuum, fine. but I'm not. And I enjoy participating. So I affect, reflect, and interact with so many people that my legacy is really about that emanation. That's my bubble, that little yodel that I'm singing in the canyon, and how many times I sing it and how often I return to that same melody.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that itself is very powerful. I think that in living our day to day, and we connect with people, right? If you're kind of partaking in life and society, you come into contact with numerous people, and that impact, or like the what is the word I'm looking for? I guess the impact that you leave, or the
like the imprint that you're leaving behind.
Yeah, that you're leaving, or even just in your interaction with them, right? And I love that you said, if I walk into a room, or, what people say about me, because I was reading an article or something, and it was saying they were talking about legacy and what that means, and thinking about, well, what would people say if there was a group of, your best friends, or people, that you've had the most contact with, what would they say about you behind your back? Which is like an interesting concept, right? Is that, what would all of these people say about you if you weren't in the room? Like, what kind of impact and imprint?
Yeah. And I would even take that a step further. Because I want the full fucking truth. Don't tell me what you think I want to hear. What do you feel in the privacy of inside of you when I walk in a room? Because you can tell me you like me, but if I feel that you're irritated, or you've got jealousy, or I've just triggered you in some way, I'm going to feel that too. And for me, just because I make you feel that way doesn't mean I take it as a sign of me failing. Right? So if you feel a certain way about me, I'm going to look at it in a way that's going to help me, or I'm going to be more honest about it in a way that's in line with my outlook. So let's say I do walk in a room, right? And I've got people who feel like, oh, Liz. I've got people to be like, what's that girl do? And I got people like, she crazy. And then I got a couple people like, look at her. For me, when I do that, I see myself in my best. It's my choice.
Yeah.
So with that girl that's like, I'm like, oh, I must be doing something right.
Yeah.
Because she's not totally okay with this. I'm polarizing. Ooh, that means I'm standing for something. And I might just real quick, like, was I ever a jerk? Okay, no, I think I'm standing for good. All right, moving on, right? So I put a couple things in that element, but still, I want to go beyond what people say, because we're too fake. And it's not even just Western culture. Like, people be fake everywhere. What do you feel when you think of me? We don't even have to go into articulation. We could just go negative, positive, light or heavy, or neutral. That's, to me, the truth of this, because it has to be more than the temporary of this idea, this construct of, like, because people could say shit in any room, right? There's so many different ways that people could interpret this, and we're always working on, like, stay in your own lane. What someone thinks of you is not your business, which is true. But with this idea of legacy, you're kind of taking it in for granted. You're kind of saying, I'm okay with thinking about how they feel about me, and I want to participate in what that becomes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, that's really important, because what they feel about you is essentially, it is reactive to what you do on a day-to-day basis, or how you, present yourself to, society, or that individual. So I think that, kind of being okay with the way in which people, I guess it's almost like, even if it's like a negative thing, right, is it can taking that with constructive criticism, as constructive criticism, and trying to figure out whether or not you know yourself enough to know that that's an issue that they may be projecting or coming up with because of all the shit that's happened in their life, or whether you were an asshole and maybe you need to change some things.
Right.
That's not how you want to be remembered.
Exactly. That's why I always check real quick. I'm like, wait a minute, was I a jerk? No, I think sometimes I'm like, ooh, I was a little snippy the last time. I'll admit to it. Because I think there's value in my multiple layers and in all of my manifestations.
Yeah. And I think one thing too that's key for, people who are watching is that you know yourself enough, right? You have to learn and kind of do the inner work and, you know, figure out and peel back those layers to really know who you are in order
Right.
to deal with the things that people say or do, you know, as in reaction to who you are and how you present
Right.
yourself to the world.
Right. And then you have to ask, well, then how do I freaking know myself?
Yeah.
And part of that is bumping into walls. Part of that is taking steps. Part of that is making a stand for something, even if in 3 weeks you're like, you know what, I don't think I am a vegetarian.
Yeah.
It's cool. You tried it. You bumped into the wall. You now know yourself better because you've tried it. So there's nothing about this that has anything to do with right or wrong, but it has to do with the willingness to experience things because the essence of you is the same.
Yeah.
And willing to try that on with a whole bunch of different shoes and situations.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that so much. So thank you so much for sharing with us. I think that, you know, it's so important for women that are watching, you know, to kind of, to get to know themselves, peel back the layers, rebel a little bit, you know, figure out what it is that they really want for themselves. And because the idea of getting stuck and losing your power is because you're trying to conform to society's standards, and maybe that's fine, maybe that works for you, right? Nothing wrong with that. But it's like, if you're feeling stuck and you're not happy with where you are, then owning that and acknowledging it and taking the action to make the change. So if you were to have one thing that these women watching right now would take away from your interview, what's the one piece of advice you have for them who are maybe, you know, looking for their purpose or, you know, just trying to figure out who they are? Like, what would be your one piece of advice for them?
I'm gonna go with one of my favorite animal medicines, which is coyote. And coyote is the trickster, and it's not like to trick you, but the coyote is like, okay, first of all, lighten up and realize that the mistakes, the follies, the miscalculations, they are just as sacred as your success and triumph. Like, it's all gravy.
Yeah.
And I think letting that settle and defending that understanding, like, okay, that did suck, but it's all gravy. It's all gravy. It's all gravy. To continually say and know and understand that you're going to be able to have a lot more self-forgiveness, and you're also going to be able to be a little more nimble when new ideas come in.
Yeah.
So because you're not going to be bartering any growth off of like, well, how perfect can I be right away with this? I'm not going to do it if I'm going to fuck up, right? Which is so not fair. But when you realize that the mess ups and all that stuff is just as sacred and fun and teachy, is that a word?
Yeah.
It's just as like illuminating and delicious to digest as the perfect stuff.
Yeah.
You just opened up a whole new world when you're able to do that, you know?
Yeah.
So I just want, that would be my thing, to be like, oh, please, it's not that bad. You got it. Don't worry. No, don't freak out. It's all good. Someone else has done way worse. Trust me.
Yeah.
And they forgave themselves. So you're good. Relax.
What I love about that is something that came up for me is, you know, you find the magic in the messy, right? Because we're not perfect human beings. There's so, you know, many layers to us, but it's acknowledging, you know, that where we are in this moment in our life is exactly where we're supposed to be. And that's the magic in it, right? All the crap that we've gone through, the crap that's going to come before us, it'll be okay because, you know, we have this, you know, one life right now, this, you know, current, present, physical, whatever it is, but we have this one life and we need to make it magical. So you find the magic in the messy and you make it work. So I love that so much. So thank you so much, Liz, for being here with us.
Thank you.
And if you want Liz's contact info, it'll go out in the email, follow up. And thank you all for being here, and stay tuned. Enjoy the interview. Bye.
Bye.